Rainbow smelts here, and a project that we've been working on over the years. Really, we kind of ramped up last year in 2014 doing stream surveys for rainbow smelts, and we're hoping to continue that this year and work with folks like Friends of Taunton Bay to help us with these surveys, and other folks as well, people who are involved in the fishery and people who maybe aren't involved yet but want to be. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. So also going to give you a little bit of information about smelts in general, kind of what they do, where they live, why they're important. So they play a really important ecological and cultural role. So culturally, smelt harvests go back a long time. They're a really significant subsistence fishery. Really early records count people harvesting smelts. It's kind of one of the first fresh fish that people can get their hands on in the spring of the year. People fish for them through the ice as well while they're kind of occupying the estuaries. But they're really the first big flush of fresh fish that people were able to get their hands on. So they're also a lot of fun to go out and catch. So they come up into all these little tiny streams by the thousands, and the streams just turn black with these fish. Oftentimes, as you're walking down the stream, people say you can hear the fish spawning before you even get down there. There are so many fish, and it's a really unique opportunity to get these youngsters involved in this fishery as well. So a lot of these streams are kind of what I like to call kid-sized streams. So they're just like these little small coastal streams. They also are occupying the big, main stem streams and rivers, but you can find thousands of these fish in these little tiny streams. And it's a really great opportunity to get kids out and get them excited about it. So it's also nighttime is a good time. Nighttime high tide is a good time to go out and collect these fish and catch these fish. And so they get to stay up past their bedtime, go out in the woods at night and that kind of thing. And it's one of those experiences that they're going to remember, that they're going to hold on to, and those moments that we can kind of create are, I think, important for planting that seed for these our young stewards here. And there's also in Maine, there's also still a small commercial fishery for smelts. So people still commercially harvest with gill nets or bag nets smelts, predominantly in the Pleasant River, and I don't know where else there's currently really a fishery. I think mostly the Pleasant River. This is a scene from just before a smelt fry, getting ready for our annual smelt fry. So picking the gill nets there. And they're really important ecologically. So they're a really important prey species, feeding all kinds of predatory fish, striped bass, as well as birds, mammals, things like that. So they're moving from freshwater to saltwater, again in these really small, shallow streams, and are a really good target for. So life cycle. So right about now, smelts are moving into these small coastal streams to spawn. So in fact, we just got an email from someone down in Bagaduce who's seeing smelts in large numbers down there. So they're starting literally right about now in our region to move up into these streams and spawn. So they're coming up in large numbers, depositing their eggs, and the males will come in and fertilize the eggs, oftentimes even going out and finding another stream and coming back in and spawning. So when these big flushes of fish come into these streams, you can go out and just look at all the eggs. There's egg mats on these streams, and you can see that the fish have been there either while they're there or the day after. And so these eggs will stick around for a few days before they'll hatch out. And so the larval stage of smelts kind of come in and out with the tide. They kind of move up and down with the tide of the brackish water. And then as they start to grow, they'll move out into the bays and kind of move with the seasons. They'll come in closer to shore in the winter as near shore temperatures cool down, and in the summer they'll move out further away from the shore. And so this graphic kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of the genetic distribution, and really these Gulf of Maine coastal currents are distributing the population. So this Eastern Maine coastal current. So this the blue here, this is the Downeast coastal population. Penobscot Bay population is in the orange there. And so you can see, and Cobscook Bay population predominantly up in Cobscook Bay. The eastern Trias, the Downeast coastal population, is being spread across the coastline here. Penobscot Bay pretty much staying right in the Penobscot Bay.
Are those genetically different populations?
They're genetically different populations. So the Downeast coastal population is genetically different from the Penobscot Bay population. So the Department of Marine Resources is out there doing collecting samples to get an idea of population sizes, age distribution, and age at spawning. So for the state of Maine, they've got only 6 annual sites, and really only 2 sites down east where they're collecting good population data using these spike nets. And so they can get some good information from that, but we really need a little bit more data. The problem with smelts is they're all over the place. They're in streams this wide and only 50 feet long or 100 feet long, so it makes it tough. But from that data, I guess I don't have it here, but from that data they can get an idea of the health of the population based on the age distribution and spawning, how many 2-year-old fish are spawning, how many 3-year-old fish are spawning, that kind of thing. So this map kind of shows, this is data collected from the Department of Marine Resources. So they've done a lot of surveys over the years. I think this data set goes back to 1971. And so data was collected from Marine Patrol officers and DMR staff members, and I don't know if how much they reached out to the public to collect this data, but so this is basically showing areas which support strong spawning in green, and the currently supports strong spawning is the most current surveys. Historical spawning, I think, is in yellow. I think is there's a date. I think it's prior to the 1980s or 1970s. There was spawning, but there's no data after that to say that there was spawning. And then areas of declining and no longer supporting spawning are in red. So the southern portion of the state, there's a lot of historical spawning, but not a lot of follow-up on those sites, and then a lot of declining and no longer supporting spawning sites. And then, so for the Downeast region, we've got a lot of those sites that historically supported spawning, and some sites that no longer support spawning are declining, but we've also got a lot of green in here. And so, and this is something that we've heard from the people who go out there and are fishing for smelts, is that we've got a really strong population of smelts down east. We were out at the brook last night and it was full. There's lots of smelts around. So,
So Egypt Stream has stopped spawning according to that red dot on there.
Egypt Stream is
Be the
Taunton there. Yeah, left one on Taunton
the
there.
left one,
that one there.
And that used to be famous for its 1-pound smelt, when I was a kid.
Yeah. So, so information like that's really important, and so part of this project, part of what we've been trying to do is, someone mentioned the DMR is like totally swamped with work, and they're busy folks, and there's a lot of streams out here. You know, you look at that map of Taunton Bay right there, and the number of little streams just in the day that come in, it's not a small task. So so with what we're trying to do and reaching out to folks to help get information on that, that's a perfect example of if it does still support spawning and DMR has it listed as it no longer supports spawning, and we can collect that data that says that it does, then that's going to get fed to DMR, and it might it'll have an impact. And we've got an example of how some of that information that people have been giving us has already had impacts on their management decisions. So, but yeah, information like that's important. So you're saying it's still.
No, I'm not saying it's still, it used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it was famous for its smell.
And it's interesting because all these streams right here say currently support spawning or support strong spawning. So, and I'll come back to this map in a little bit. We're going to take a look at an interactive map of sites that have been surveyed and how we are going to kind of determine sites that are going to be important to surveys. So this kind of gives you an idea of what's going on with these fish. So the historic range is as far south as Chesapeake Bay and up into Canada, and that's not all that long ago. That's only a few decades ago, and now the range has shrunk to basically half of that, and this pink portion is continuing to move up the coast.
Is there any other name for the smelt? Because I grew up as a kid on Chesapeake Bay, and they used to get what we called gudgeon. Is that the same thing?
I don't know if that's the same thing as smelts. I don't know. Does anybody else know what gudgeons?
We caught them with a hook, line, and spreader and bait, not with a dip net, but they were the size of smelt.
Yeah. There's I don't know. There's any number of different
That's
little
why I
fish
wonder about local
moving in and out,
names,
but yeah, local. It could be a local name too, or. So part of the reason for this is this little case study here in New Jersey, smelt harvest in 1833, with information from that far back, show harvest measured by the wagon loads. And then in only 1849, they were already reporting declines in the numbers of smelts. And so as you follow the timeline, in 1941 they were considered extirpated from New Jersey. So that's not a very long period of time. And there's similar, you see similar stories as you move up the coast. So the New York smelt trade in 1870s averaged 1.35 million pounds annually. 10 years later, it's no longer a vibrant fishery. And this one was pretty wild to me. 2,300 people targeting smelts in a single day on a single river. So overfishing certainly likely a part of the cause of decline, but industrial pollution was also noted very early on as a likely cause of declines. And also, at this time, people were damming streams all over the place, and so there's smelt can't jump over dams. Smelt really, they're not very strong swimmers. So even I think it's an 11% grade or higher is impassable to smelts. So a poorly placed culvert would be a blockage to smelts, that kind of thing. And so harvest trends kind of follow that decline. So part of this might, especially the decline in the late 50s, might be late 40s, early 50s, might be due to a decrease in interest in smelts. Maybe people just weren't, the demand wasn't there for smelts. But likely a big cause of it is population just wasn't there. And the harvests show that decline. And then really almost no harvest. Now there's a small harvest on the Pleasant River, and that's about it. And I don't know what their annual catch is over there, but it's not
Couple thousand tons.
it's not going to be on that listed in by the 1,000 pounds. So some of the threats, habitat loss, again, dams and culverts are a total blockage to smelt. So a head of tide or below dam is going to be a blockage. Culverts can be a really big issue. Poorly placed small culverts, even if this culvert at high tide is here and there's water going into that culvert, that doesn't mean smelts are going to use it. It's still a constricted culvert. It's still a blockage issue. One of the guys who worked with us last spring doing a smelt survey made that observation that even though there might be a culvert that looks good, that's underwater at high tide, it's not necessarily going to pass fish, and they just don't. Fish do whatever they want to do, and if they don't want to use a culvert, they don't use a culvert. It's kind of up to them. So culverts can be a really big issue. So 5% of the surveyed historic spawning sites reduced or blocked by coastal dams. So that's based on some culvert surveys that have been done across the state, but those aren't complete culvert surveys. And again, just because a culvert looks like it's going to pass fish doesn't necessarily mean it's going to pass fish. So the numbers are kind of variable, but 39% of the spawning streams were noted to be impacted back in 2012. There's been a lot more culvert surveys done since then, so that 39% is likely changed. That culvert survey only included 35% of the state at that time. So this is a mean annual surface temperature from Booth Bay, and so this is probably a potential issue. Habitat degradation, so the increase in temperature from 1905 to 2005. It doesn't look like much, but a few degrees, a couple degrees is a pretty significant change when your life cycles depend on temperature, and if that's a big part of it, then that's going to have a big impact. And then this sort of non-point source solution, or non-point source pollution. So these bars here show rainfall events on the Pleasant River, and the blue line is pH. So there is an apparent drop in pH as we get those big rainfalls, and especially in the spring when we get big freshets as the snow melts and we get these big spring rains. The pH really tends to plummet, and so that can also be an issue, especially right about now when they're spawning. We get a big rainfall event, pH plunges, those fish are either in their larval stage or they're still in the egg stage and they're just about to hatch. That's a really fragile time for those fish. So acid rain can be a big issue. And then again, these stream crossings, improper stream crossings are a really big issue, not just for smelts, for other fish species as well. So we work a lot with, obviously, Atlantic salmon and alewives, and so these types of crossings are a big issue for all of those fish. So the current status, so in 2004, I think it was, smelts were, rainbow smelts were listed as a species of concern due to decreases in decline in numbers. The department also does offshore trawl surveys, and they've found decreases in smelt abundances through those trawl surveys. And so last year there was an emergency closure of taking of smelts from Stonington south to Kittery, and that was largely due to a couple things. First of all, the DMR trawl surveys in the fall previous to the closure showed that there were really reduced numbers of smelts. They weren't catching smelts offshore where there should have been smelts. And then on top of that, people weren't catching them through the ice from the hook and line fishery. So those two things combined, they decided that something was going on and needed to make an emergency decision to close the fishery. And so that really got people concerned about what was going on with smelts, and especially people who like to fish for them didn't want to stop fishing for them. And so once this really prompted us to look at this and see what we could do, how we could get involved. And one thing that DSF over the years has done a really good job at is engaging the community and kind of growing that relationship with the community members. And so something like this, we were able to act pretty quickly, found some funding to get somebody on the ground doing some work, and started immediately working with some of these folks that Dwayne already had contacts with and had worked with in the past to get on the ground in our region, our Washington Hancock County, and start looking at some of these streams and saying, are there fish in these streams? Is there spawning going on in these streams? And then feed that data back to the Department of Marine Resources so that they could make a little bit more of an informed decision, at least in our area, that we can focus on moving forward with the smelt fishery. And so so part of what came from that, and this is kind of a good example of how, there's folks who we're working with to gather this information, who are out helping us collect information on smelts, directing us where to go, that kind of thing, can see the impact of their efforts. So basically in this year, in March of this year, the Department of Marine Resources came up with their 2015 rainbow smelt regulations. So they broke the state out into 3 zones. Zone 3 is basically the Downeast region outside of Penobscot Bay. Zone 2 is this Penobscot Bay region. Zone 1 is the southern part of the state. And so Zone 1 had the most strict regulations. Zone 2, there were some more regulations. They were regulating the bag limit, and I don't know if they changed the length, the duration of the fishery, but the bag limit was lowered from 2 quarts to 1 quart, and they closed fishing off Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So a little bit more strict regulations. In Zone 3, they kept the regulations the same as they were previously, so there were no changes in the regulations. So 2 quarts of fish per angler per night, and it's a 7-day-a-week fishery. So a lot of that has to do with the information that we were able to feed to the Department of Marine Resources based on what we were able to collect from other folks out there who were fishing, or those other folks were really integral in getting us to the places that were important to collect data from. So that was a good thing, and I think the folks who were involved saw that, and that's I'm going to talk about that again in a second here. So this just shows again kind of the map of where the regulations, where the zones are. So this is kind of the state's regional conservation strategies: continue monitoring, restore historical and degraded habitat, take fishery management actions, expand research to estimate population size, and implement stocking where it's appropriate. This is where the commercial fishery is, and again, it's really limited to the Pleasant River. So these are the sites that were surveyed last year, 2014, by Colin doing the smelt stream survey project. So he was out pretty much every night that he was able to get out when the tide was high in the evening. And he was out surveying these streams. He was out talking with people who were fishing the streams. He was out talking with elver fishermen. He was out talking with game wardens. And we put out a couple press releases and put an article in the paper asking for help from volunteers. And he was working with those folks that contacted us from that. Either getting information from them or going to the streams that they recommended that he go to. And so the result was he got to 82 sites, I think, last year, and collected a lot of really good information. And none of that would have been possible without help from all the folks that he
And red doesn't mean that there were no smell. Red is just indicating the site.
Red is just indicating the site. Yep. So it was a really big effort. We had some great engagement from the community, and we're hoping to at the very least revisit those sites this year and visit some new sites. So all the data was collected on a voluntary basis. There's also this catch card. Catch card thing that exists, so people can fill out these cards to say what they caught from either their hook and line fishery through the ice, or recreational fishery in the spring. Samplers visit sites to collect information once a week plus 2 weekend days a month. And so I think this pertains mostly to the hook and line fishery. So the samplers would count all smelts and measure them and determine sex and take scales if they wanted to go that far. And ideally, as we move forward, samplers would contact commercial fishermen and talk with them. And so just kind of get as much information as we can from them. Next steps with this project is ideally to continue the smelt survey. That last year was kind of a pilot, and so we're hoping to continue at a larger scale. Minimum of 150 streams, and collects more data and compile it in a more kind of organized, efficient manner for us in-house so that we can get it more efficiently to the folks who need it, like the Department of Mineral Resources. So a couple things that we've kind of learned with this project is some folks are really excited about working with us to collect this information. Some folks are really they're out there to collect their 2 quarts of smelts and fry them up and eat them with their kids or whatever. And other folks are really serious about smelt fishing, and while they're excited, they're hesitant about kind of working with us. And I think something that's really important to remember, especially when you're dealing with a fishery that's kind of like on the brink of closure, or it's within sight, is that people a lot of times think that we're out there trying to close the fishery. We're trying to collect data that gives a reason to close the fishery, when really the point is kind of the opposite. It's to keep the fishery open, to keep it available to those folks, but also understanding that the health of the fishery is the most important part. So not saying that if you give us information, we'll keep the fishery open, but, you know, if you give us information, we'll be able to get it to the folks who can make sure that the population is healthy enough to keep open. So making sure that, first of all, we're not telling them that the fishery will stay open if you get us the information, because that's just not the way that it always works. So I think it's really important to be honest with them about it, because it could turn out to be not a very good situation. So, and also making sure that they understand that with their cooperation and participation, good things can happen, like the fishery remaining open Downeast. That was a really positive outcome from the hard work that those folks put in, and hopefully it'll stay that way. Redmond's Creek. This is a stream in Harrington. So this is an example of how working with the community and working with folks and being able to quickly respond to something like a piece of property coming up for sale, an important smelt stream, can really happen quickly. So Redmond's Creek holds a strong smelt run, and the property came up for sale, and Dwayne happened to know some folks who fish down there, and they let Dwayne know that the property was coming up for sale. It's a really important piece of stream, and it didn't really want it to get into. We wanted to keep it in our hands so that we could make sure that it stays open for people and remains accessible for people to get down there and fish for smelts, and also kind of keep an eye on it and make sure that their nice riparian zone stays intact in the way that it is. And so because of those connections, Dwayne might want to talk a little bit more about it, but was able to really make a quick turnaround on that and make something really unique happen here.
Yeah, so that was set up as far as we know, the first smelt reserve that was actively purchased just for the purposes of protecting habitat for the smelt and for public access. And that was in Harrington a few years ago, and people really rallied. The town was very supportive of it, and so we're looking to do that in other places. And I'm going to talk about one place here in this bay, and in a few minutes we'll talk about almost a carbon copy of that project there that could be done here. And we removed some culverts. There were some old washed out culverts there, and so we cleaned the place up. We put up a little kiosk. People understand what it named it after one of our members who was a Narragansett High School biology teacher who lived right there by the stream, who passed away. So it's kind of brought the whole community into it in many different ways.
And so as part of these surveys, some of that information is the type of information that we're collecting. Like, so who's the landowner? Are they, and any kind of anecdotal information we can get from folks, which could lead to something like this. Is the piece of property up for sale? Is there a potential culvert project on that stream? Or so we're looking for fish, but we're also asking folks for any information they have on the stream, historic information, or information on run timing, or all of it. So really trying to get as much info as we can on those. So here's a couple more photos of Redmond's Creek here. It's a really heavily used site, so there's a pretty good social trail there. Easy to access. Yep.
Yeah, I've got a question from somebody who's ignorant about freshwater fishing. What is the reason? Is that both the smelt and also, I guess, the elvers, glass eels seem to go up to their spawning places at night. Is this do you think to decrease predation? Is it something, you know, it seems to me that it would be a lot easier to do some of these studies in the daytime, but you wouldn't know about that.
Well, I mean, I think they're moving up there at night because of the predation. I think it's, and some of these surveys we can certainly do during the day. When smelts are in there spawning and lay eggs, you can go out to the stream and collect good quantitative information on the size of the egg mats and the density of eggs, and get a good idea of how many fish are up there spawning, so some of that stuff can be done during the day, certainly, but to actually see the fish that are in there, to get an idea of when they were in there, what part of the tide they were in there, that kind of thing. And for people angling, you know, they're moving up the stream at night, so that's when they're going to be out there. So if we're doing surveys and want to talk with people who are out, evening is really the time. Plus it's kind of, you know, it's fun to go out at night. Watch that too.
Past our bedtime.
Pass over, just like 8 o'clock these days.
But this stream right here is so productive, and nobody really understands why is this one so particularly productive, but the whole bottom of the stream will be, it looks like cornmeal on the bottom, sometimes an inch thick for yards and yards. Right from this little waterfall you see, they can't get past that point. They come up that far and they start to spawn from there all the way down to tidewater, which is where the marsh is. And the whole thing can be just plastered with eggs like this thick at the end of the season. The black ducks will be in there gorging themselves on the eggs, and you see raccoon tracks everywhere, and half of the fish, you know, lots of pieces of fish strewn all over the place. So on top of all the fishing that the people are doing, there's a lot of critters in there too. So you can see the beaten down trail. There's a lot of people going there.
So basically, DMR needs volunteers to get out and survey these streams, and we're hoping to get out there and get folks involved in the surveys. So it's a lot of fun. It's, you know, we're hoping to involve municipalities and schools and volunteers, folks who are already out there angling, and folks who might just have an interest, and maybe they have a smelt stream next to their house and can keep an eye on it, that kind of thing. Again, it's a fantastic opportunity to get kids involved, and if anything, just get them excited when you have lots of fish, live moving things that you can incorporate into education. It has a really significant impact. We see that a lot with the Atlantic salmon. We've got anglers who come to our shop and are super passionate about the fish, and, you know, almost brought to tears when they talk about some of their old stories. And there's a big disconnect there because it's been so long since people have been either able to angle for them, or since the fish have been there, that younger generations don't have that same passion for the fish. So we've still got smelts, and those kids can still get out there and have those moments that create that passion. So it's a good opportunity to get them out there and get them in the streams. So a little more outreach that we do surrounding this. So we've got our annual smelt fry, just happened last week, and that's really a celebration of the fishery. So celebrating the smelts, and the smelt run is just about to start. The commercial smelt harvest just finished, and so we generally have lots of fresh smelts that we fry. Had a great turnout this year. We'll be having a smolt bolt and bloater bash in just a couple weeks, so that's kind of celebrating 2 migrations of fish, Atlantic salmon, smolt, alewives moving up into the rivers. Whole smoked alewives down here are called bloaters. Like the name, don't like it. People, it's catchy. So, and we're working to bring a little bit more, do a little bit more outreach on these important anadromous fish. We're working on a mobile smokehouse project. So we just got a grant this past winter to put together a commercial smokehouse in a trailer that we'll be able to take around from place to place and do things like smoke smelts during the smelt season and smoke alewives during the alewife season. It's a kind of a traditional way of preserving these food items. So maybe not in a mobile trailer, but smoking them. So trying to keep that kind of cultural part of the fishery alive and folks informed. So, so that's kind of a presentation end of it, and we've also got an interactive map here, and Dwayne's going to come up. But does anybody have any questions, I guess?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you've had a chance to process any of the information Colin Shanklin collected last year. I mean, did any interesting findings come out of that so far?
Well, we've put some of that stuff up and displayed it on our maps, and I think it was kind of a scatter of sites that he went to, and we're still kind of, all that went over to Marine Resources, and they were able to kind of see where there was still spawning and where there wasn't, and but I think ideally moving forward, it's tough. I think one thing we learned is first of all, it's so hard to pinpoint when these fish are moving. So you could have gone to a stream one night and there weren't any fish there, but that doesn't mean there weren't fish there the next day, 2 days later. So so I think what's going to be beneficial is really taking a look at, and I'll show you this on this interactive map, taking a look at what DMR has for information, and looking especially at those historic sites and those sites that say no longer support or support only a limited fishery, and going back and really kind of looking at those streams and saying, all right, is there really a fishery there? Are there really fish there? And that'll be some pretty good information.
So targeting those ones in particular.
Yeah, and also being kind of getting our sampling protocols down, so we're collecting temperature and pH and time of the tide and the moon phase and all of that. I think we'll be able to put together some pretty neat information. So
And some of the things that we've done with it too is to prioritize sites for restoration. Some of them, it's just obvious, and maybe it's never been fully documented before. This culvert needs to get addressed, or this property is up for sale, it's beautiful, habitat, everything's intact. Let's see if we can interest one of the local land trusts in trying to acquire it. So we have kind of a priority list of some actionable things that we can do to address restoration or protection.
yeah, that's a big part, because there's so many of these little tiny streams. And
I have a question for Dwayne. There's an agricultural farmland trust for Maine. Is there a fisheries land trust?
We're about as close to that as you can find.
This seems
So
to be-
we started as a fisheries.
It's an opportunity waiting to happen.
Well, we don't, in Maine, we have so many nonprofits, right? Ideally, and what's happening is that the land trusts that are along the coast are starting to pay attention to this when they had never before really paid attention.
So they consider that as a criterion.
Right. So Blue Hill Heritage Trust, for instance, we just sent them all this data at their request. They knew we were getting involved with this in their territory. Frenchman's Bay Conservancy, Island Heritage Trust, Bagaduce Watershed Association, Downeast Coastal Conservancy. So rather than try to invent something, and we were a fisheries group who decided we better get into the land conservation because nobody else was addressing these river corridors and streams. The other land trusts still weren't.
It sounds like down east, you're halfway there already.
Right, so Downeast we're in pretty good shape, but other places along the coast, I think people are catching on to it. The next step, I think, is with dams. So there's a lot of properties that have dams, and there's no dam trust around. And we need, well, actually, I shouldn't say that.
With a name like that, there ought to be.
But the Penobscot River Restoration Trust was established specifically to buy dams on the Penobscot River, remove them, put in fish passage, and then go out of business. And they're in the process of going out of business now after having bought 2 dams at $25 million, removing them at another whatever million, and then now they're purposely fading out. But we need to do the same thing in other places where some of these other dams are.
On a lesser scale.
Yeah.
How far up the Union River does smoke go?
Well,
Right to the dam.
to the dam.
Damn.
Not getting over that one.
Let's say the truck up.
Elbers, on the other hand,
And climb.
they climb right over.